Okay, so let's answer that question now instead. Xamarin, is Xamarin dead? Many people think so. Microsoft maybe not have been that good on marketing relating to Xamarin, but I would say Xamarin is not dead. It's more alive than ever, even if the brand Xamarin will die. So will it be part of .NET from .NET 6? They have talked about unifying .NET from .NET 5, but I think it's related to the pandemic we had recently, and that we still are in. That things took a little bit more longer than they first thought. So everything related to Xamarin and unifying and .NET MAUI will be in the .NET 6 wave that is about a year away. Hopefully we will have a preview in the beginning of the next year, but I will focus more on the upcoming things later in this session. So first I will talk a little bit about what has happened recently. So we have a little bit of agenda for the session today, some tooling updates. We'll talk about the latest tools. Xamarin.Forms 5, Xamarin.Forms toolkit. We'll mention a few things about that. And we also have Blazor mobile bindings. And then I will end with speaking about .NET MAUI. So regarding tooling, we have had releases, for example, iOS 14 with Xcode 12. Xamarin supporting that the first week. Usually Xamarin have the same day support, but this year they got the final bits from Apple so late that they was not able to have a same day release. Usually they got the bits about a week before the final release. As I understand it, they got it the same day this year with iOS 14. So that's why they couldn't have the same day release. But if you needed to do iOS 14 stuff from the first day, there were preview bits even from Xamarin. So, and we also have a recent release of Visual Studio last week, and we have it together with the .NET Conf and the release of .NET 5. So, but even if .NET 5 is not part of Xamarin is not part of .NET 5, we have some great news. For example, we'll have Hot Reload 2.0 together with Xamarin.Forms 5, and they have completely rewritten Hot Reload to make it perform better and extend it to other platforms. So now it's based on the same technique that we have for UWP apps, and that means that we also can use Hot Reload for SAML when we are writing UWP apps with Xamarin.Forms. So that's great, I think. And we also have C#9, even if some of the features requires to be run on .NET 5. The most of the things we can use even in our Xamarin apps. Just go update the target language to latest major or set it just to C#9. James Montemagno had a great blog post about how to do that. If you want to read more about it, just search for James Montemagno Xamarin and you will find his blog. So let's talk about Xamarin.Forms 5. The most exciting thing happening in the Xamarin world right now. I think we are at preview 4 still. We were there at least the last time I checked. That was just a couple of days ago. So, but I have started using Xamarin.Forms 5 in my apps. It's very stable, and most of the features in Xamarin.Forms 5 we have had them for a while, but in preview. The goal with Xamarin.Forms 5 is to stabilize everything that they had in preview. Some part has also been moved out, and they have moved it to Xamarin.Forms Community Toolkit, because Xamarin.Forms 5 is the final release of Xamarin.Forms, or at least the final major release. Of course, we will have service updates this year when we're waiting for .NET MAUI, And we will also have 1 year with service releases for Xamarin.Forms after that they have published the stable version of .NET MAUI. But no more major releases. Xamarin.Forms 5 is the final release there. So during this session, I will show you a little bit about the new features in Xamarin.Forms 5. So let's end PowerPoint. Let me do like this and go to Visual Studio instead. So I have written a couple of sample apps that can show us the features of Xamarin.Forms 5 and how to use them. So let's start that app first. We have carousel view that has been in preview for a pretty long time that we can use now in stable without adding any experimental flags. So that's great. We have shapes that makes it possible to draw things. Earlier we have used Skia Sharp for that. I will show you the code for all these samples later also. We have control templates that we can use, for example, to customize the look of radio button. So this is with a control template, and this is the regular radio button. We have brushes that makes it possible to use gradients in Xamarin.Forms without having an external library. I use Pancake View for that in many years, at least since it was released. That's great. Pancake View still have some features that are not available in Xamarin.Forms, but it's really great to have gradients in Xamarin.Forms now. Then we have Swipe View that also have been in preview for a while that we can use, for example, with Collection View, but we can use it basically for all elements of control. So we can add items to swipe. We can do like this. We can set write items to review actions, or we can just have execute action that we will swipe and it will execute code. Okay, so let's take a look about how the code looks. So this demo application, we can take a first look at the carousel view because that was the first control that I showed to you. Yes, remove this so we can see the code a little bit better. So here I have a carousel view. No, that's not the correct. Here is a carousel view. So we create a carousel view, we create the item source, and we're binding, for example, photos to it. We don't have to use images or photos. We can use whatever content we want in a carousel view. Then we have indicator view that is separate control, but it's pretty tight coupled to carousel view. So in carousel view, we will point out which indicator view to use for the carousel. But I think that's a great decision to don't have them in the same control, because when we have them outside of the carousel view, we can put them wherever we want on the screen. For example, we can have it in the bottom, we can have it as an overlay. It's up to the developer and designers to decide where to put it. So that's great. The carousel view can also have an empty view specified. I don't have specified one here, but we can do that. Content view, and we can add a label. Items. So if we bind to an empty collection, it will show you this, that we specify an empty view. Then we will have item template, where we specify the content for the carousel. In this case, I have image, and I also have added some text and an overlay, so the text will be more visible. So it will look like this. And you can see, for example, that we can see a preview of next and previous image that we can achieve with setting peak area inset. If I change this to 0, it will show the full photo. Need to redeploy this because the debug channel is not open, so we cannot use hot reload. So just a few seconds to build and deploy it. I'm using just the iPhone simulator during this session because it's much faster to deploy to compared to the Android emulator, but everything I show you will also work on Android. So here you can see the carousel again. Some Microsoft and Xamarin people. And here is the indicator view that you can customize. You can set selected indicator color, you can set indicator color, and yeah, you can style it a little bit. So that's the carousel view. Now in Xamarin.Forms 5 it will be stable. So let's take a look at shapes. Earlier, as I said, we probably have used Skia Sharp to do some drawings. Skia Sharp is much more powerful than the shapes in Xamarin.Forms 5, but I think the shapes here is pretty powerful too and can cover most of the cases. For example, you can draw a rectangle like this one. Here I used grid to add an overlay with text on the rectangle. So you can do that like this because grid can have multiple children. You can draw a line like this. You can set stroke line cap to have round endings, stroke thickness, yeah, but we can also draw a polyline with specifying points like this. And we can set stroke, of course, on that, stroke line join, round. You can draw ellipses like this. Now we maybe can update it live when we have the debugger connected. And have a lot of different options that you can set here. Then we can also draw path. For example, in this case, I have draw a star. I draw it first in Sketch, then I opened the SVG file, and I copied this data to it and added it to Visual Studio like this. So we can have that drawn on the screen. So I think that's pretty powerful and very useful feature. And you can use shapes to make more beautiful apps without having to add any third-party libraries. So it will replace Skia Sharp in some cases, and it will also replace Pancake view in some cases. So that's great. I think that we have more powerful features added to Xamarin.Forms. Let's take a look at the control templates. We have had control templates in Xamarin.Forms for a while. But with the release of Xamarin.Forms 5, they have added more places where you can use this. For example, radio button. Radio button is also new in Xamarin.Forms 5, I think. But for example, you can do like this. You can bind it to a control template that I have defined here in my app.xaml. The reason I have defined it here is that I want to be able to reuse it on all pages. If you want it just for one page, the control template, you can add it to the pages resource dictionary. So we will do like this. Control template, give the key, radio in this case, and we will define how it will look. Then we can use template binding to bind to properties on the actual radio button. In this case, I will use a radio button inside of the control template as well, but you don't have to do that. But group name is property of radio button, and the same with value. So you can use it like this, and then if you go back to control template XAML, here we can see that value yes is coming from this property and is bind to the label here. So you can use it like this. As you can see, I'm not a designer, but you can do a lot of great stuff with this to make a radio button, for example, much more beautiful looking. Brushes, let's take a look at that. We have had able to set background colors and things like that in Xamarin.Forms, of course, from the beginning. But with brushes, we have a more similar API to what you have in UWP XAML, and you have had in other Windows XAMLs as well. And I think that's great because it's much more powerful way to set background colors, for example. So we can have a solid color brush. If you want a background, for example, to be just one color, so we create a solid color brush and we'll assign red to it. We can also have a linear gradient like this. We can specify start point and end point. Then we can add a couple of different gradient stops to it. In this case, we have 3, but we can also have 2, or we can have more than 3, like this. And we can also specify a radiant gradient brush like this, that we can change offset for example, and we will have to look in another way. So it can also be powerful because everyone loves gradient and will make your apps looks more beautiful. Okay, so let's take a look at the swipe view and how you can use that. In this case, I'm just using a stack layout. You will probably use it in a list view, not in a list view. In list view, you have the context actions, but you can, of course, you can use this too. But I mean that it's probably most used in a collection views. Because it's great to swipe in a list like this. So to achieve this, we will wrap the element we want to swipe in a swipe view. Now we can set write items, and inside the write items property we'll specify the swipe item. So we can set text, we can set a background color, we can also set an icon if we want to, icon image source, so we can have a more beautiful looking app. We can also have left items, and on swipe items element here we can set the mode. In this case, execute. The default is review. Review is that we have for the right items, but because that is default, we don't need to set that. And here we have execute, and then we can bind it to a command. For example, if you want code to run when we are doing the swipe gesture. It's just the same for the second item, but if we have a collection, we just need to define this in the template. I think this is really great. I have implemented it myself a few times in different apps, but it's a lot of code and it's pretty complex to achieve, so it's great that Xamarin.Forms has this out of the box now. Another new feature of Xamarin.Forms 5 is drag and drop. That is pretty nice. So I have built a sample app here as well that I can show you. It's like a Trello similar app, maybe not that good looking, but we have a board here that we can add tasks to, and we can drag them to other columns like this. Okay. Maybe need to restart the app. Just a few seconds. Okay, we're back. Okay, let's try to add a new item. It's not working on iOS right now. That's the problem. It's a bug in the preview. It works on Android, but I've not prepared an Android item, so I maybe cannot show that right now. Let's see if I have an Android emulator ready. I recently reinstalled my computer related to some problems, so maybe not have set up an Android device yet. Okay, but let's take a look at the code. This will be fixed until the stable release of Xamarin.Forms 5, of course. So we have the main page here. I have a grid setting up how it will look. Then to the stack layout, in this case that I want to drag, I have not the stack layout I want to drag, the stack layout that I want to release things in. I will add a drop gesture recognizer, set allow drop to true, bind it to an event, and for the frame, in this case, I want to drag. I will add a drag gesture recognizer, set can drag to true, and have an event that will update some things. So let's take a look at the events here. So when drag starting, I will get an ID, and I will send that to the view model that we have started the dragging. And the reason I want to do that is I want to hide it from the original place. So we can see here that I set here started item is visible to false, because if I don't do this, it will stay in the first column at the same time I'm also dragging it away. And when I drop it, I want to remove it from the first column, and I will save it to the other column. In this case, it's just 3 different observable collections. So that's also a very usable feature of Xamarin.Forms 5 that hopefully will be released soon, and they will release fix so we can run it on iOS as well. But it's pretty simple. Just add a drag gesture recognizer to the item you want to drag, and add a drop gesture recognizer to the item you want to drop things to. And it's also possible to drop items from other apps, for example. Okay. Some of the features that they announced that should be released with Xamarin.Forms 5 has been outtaken. The reason for that is that we really want to have a stable Xamarin.Forms release, but to make the code possible, they have moved those parts to Xamarin.Forms. Xamarin Community Toolkit is the official name. It's a Microsoft-owned project, but it's driven by the community with support from some of the peoples at the Microsoft team. So Xamarin Community Toolkit have some great stuff that you usually use in your apps. We have let's see here, behaviors, converters, effects, things that you often write that and rewrite for each project. We have bool to object converter, byte array to image source, into bool converters, a lot of different nice converters. We have some behaviors, masks, max length, required string validation behaviors. But we also have some of the views that was meant to be included in Xamarin.Forms 5, because Microsoft have moved them to the toolkit instead. They maybe will be part of .NET MAUI later, but right now they are in Xamarin Community Toolkit. So we have media element, for example, that was part of Xamarin.Forms for a while in an experimental state. We have tab view. We have also have they had talked about app bar as well, but they maybe not have added that late yet. But we also have some other community controls here in the toolkit. So I think that's great. It's very similar that we have had for Windows earlier, there, where we have had a community toolkit that the community can add things that will be useful for them, but maybe not will fit into the core package of Xamarin.Forms. Okay, let's continue with PowerPoint a little bit. So you maybe have heard of Blazor. Blazor is something that is very hot right now. But often when we talk about Blazor, we talk about web development, especially web assembly development. But there are also a Blazor server. And now we have Blazor mobile bindings. We have had that for a while, but it's been not talked much about. But when we're talking about .NET MAUI, that we'll be talking about more later, they have said that Blazor will be one of the techniques that you can use for building Xamarin apps or MAUI apps. But you can use Blazor already now. Maybe not for production, but you can go and try it out, because mobile Blazor bindings is experimental state. I have tried it, and it's a little bit buggy, especially the developer experience. So I don't recommend you to use it for production right now. But it's very promising. I will probably use it because I think it's easier in some ways to get started with Blazor. Especially for new developers, data bindings can be a little bit complicated to get started with. So I think it would be great to have Blazor as an option. So Blazor is a component-based library where you build in components and you reuse them in your apps. So we have Razor syntax. If you have used MVC, you're familiar with the Razor. We have a native UI because the UI is built of Xamarin.Forms, and you know that Xamarin.Forms is using native UI components. So if you're using mobile Blazor bindings, it's not web, it's native UI. But we also have the Blazor hybrid app that also in experiment state, you can say that it works a little bit similar to Electron, where you can combine the native UI with a web UI. So for example, you're writing an app, you want the navigation to be native, but you want the content to be reused with your web app that also are written with Blazor. You can do that. Just add a Blazor web view to your app, and you can add Blazor code to it. So it will be like a Blazor app inside of your app. You will not add the URL to a server or something like that. It will be run inside of your app with a web engine. So it will can be used offline even if it's web technology and it's not WebAssembly. And so that's possible, but right now you can only try that on Windows because you need a pre-release of Edge. Okay, let's talk about .NET MAUI. .NET Multi-Platform Application User Interface is what it stands for. It was released, not a release, it was announced at Build earlier this year in May that they will release something that will be the next generation of Xamarin.Forms. So .NET MAUI will be based on Xamarin.Forms, but it will be rewritten in some parts and improved in some parts. With .NET MAUI, we will have support for building Windows apps, Mac apps, and of course iOS and Android apps. It's the official supported platform, but we will probably have other platforms supported as well. For example, already now Samsung supports Xamarin.Forms for Tizen, and they will probably do that for .NET MAUI as well. So there are some improvements that they will do for .NET MAUI. They will rewrite how they work with the renderer, both to boost the performance, but they will also make it more flexible, and so you can use other development technologies than SAML and MVVM. So on this picture, you can see how the renders is working today. We have a Xamarin.Forms button, then we have a button renderer, and then we have a native button, and the renderer is rendering the actual UI button from the abstract description that we have in the Xamarin.Forms button. But the Xamarin.Forms button and the button renderer is very tight coupled together. That means that the button renderer has dependencies on the binding framework. And with .NET MAUI, I said we can use Blazor for writing apps, and there will also be an MVU option. And both Blazor and MVU don't have the bindings as we have in MVVM and XAML. So they will make it possible to have renders without the dependencies to the bindings framework. So what they will do, that instead of just having a Xamarin.Forms button, they will have a Xamarin.Forms button interface. And it will be the same principle for all other controls, but I use button in this example. So we will, in .NET MAUI, will, for example, have a XAML button, we will have a Blazor button, and we will have a Comet/MVU button, because there are an open source project that is called Comet from one of the team members of Xamarin.Forms. And the MVU style will probably be very similar to his project Comet. I will show you that a little bit later. So we can have different implementations of the button. Now we will have a button handler that was the render. They have renamed it to handler right now. At least they call it handler, and I think that will be the final name. But the button handler don't know if it's a SAML button, a Blazor button, or a MVU button. They only know that it is a button. That makes it possible to have different type of developer technologies, and we can add others easy. And the button handler will only map the properties of the iButton interface and to the native button. So you can reuse the button handler in a better way than you can do right now. So let's take a look how Comet and MVU will look. If you have tried developing apps with Swift, you will see that it is pretty similar. When we're using MVU, let's find the correct window. We have it here. So when you are defining a UI, we have in this main page, we have a Comet view, and then we will declare the UI in C# code like this, but it will not be the regular C# code based on the same as the SAML. For example, we will find this view is the body, and inside the body we will render a text view. We will have a text view, and we'll return a VStack, that is the virtual stack layout. We can say we can add some properties to it. We can add some spacing, and then we will add the text view to it that we have referred here. We'll add a new text, and inside the text we can pass an action, what will happen when we press to it. Like this. And the button like this was just an action. We can of course define the action outside and pass it to the button if you want to. Then we will have a fluent syntax to update the property values. So like background, color red, color white, like this. So that's pretty nice. And it's, as I said, very similar to Swift UI or the Fluent extension that we already had to Xamarin.Forms. So let's run this, and I will show you a pretty nice feature that they have in Comet. It says, so as you can see here, I have added the Clancy Comet package, but I also had added Clancy Comet Reload that makes it possible to hot reload content, and it's really nice here. Press me. You can update text there. I have not installed the extension, I realize right now, since my computer crashed and I had to reinstall it. But if you add the extension, you will have hot reload instantly. You don't have to press save. So you can change whatever code you want here, and it will update immediately after you are finished with editing. But we can try to run the button here and press it, and you can see that the action ran and it set the text value to you pressed. So that is Comet, and we will have something similar in .NET MAUI that will be released next year in November with the .NET 6 wave, because .NET 6 is required to make it possible to release .NET MAUI. We'll have to wait for the first .NET 6 preview before we can have the first preview of the .NET MAUI. But if you're interested to follow the development of .NET MAUI, you can go to github.com/.NET/MAUI, and you can follow the development here. You can also see some roadmap and milestones we have in Q4 2020 and Q3. They will rewrite render architecture revision, source solution and project simplification, complete approved proposal, or implement MVU. So that will be the things they will work on from Q4 this year to Q3 next year, and in September we will have a release candidate of .NET MAUI, and in November it will be general availability. And here we also can see the platform supported. In .NET MAUI will support Android platform 21 and higher, iOS 10 and higher. Linux will be supported by the community. Microsoft will support macOS. Samsung will support Tizen. Microsoft will support Windows. And then we also can see some of the features and other things that MAUI will support. So I'm really looking forward to MAUI. I think it's a great next step for Xamarin, and I also think that the rebranding is good because we want Xamarin to be a more integrated part of .NET, and they will hopefully get more resources for continuing developing Xamarin when it's a part of .NET and become a first citizen of Microsoft. So that was my session today. Thank you for listening. I'm here now to answer questions that you can post in the portal. If you have questions later, I will also be in the portal and answer them there. Or you can reach out to me on Twitter at HINDRIKES. You can go to my blog or LinkedIn. Thank you.